Well, 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 look who came crawling back. I don't know why I started out on such a hostile note. Thank you, everybody, for coming back and for joining me for this episode of Ask Away. I appreciate it. Hi to everybody in the live chat. I am going to do what I usually do and answer some questions from my Patreon patrons first. So if you're joining us live in the chat and you have a question or something you want me to talk about, or especially if you were planning on being generous and donating a super chat or a super sticker or something like that, please hold on to that until later in the show when I can actually pay attention to the live chat. Because when I'm answering the patron questions, I'm just focusing on that and I'm not paying attention to the live chat. So I will probably miss whatever you want me to see. So hold on to your questions and anything else you want me to see in the live chat until later in the show, and I'll let you know when. But for now, let's start out with some questions from my Patreon patrons. So here we go. The first question from a patron is from Joshua Hillerup, who says, can you please try taking a bit of script from something that you've already done and see what this generates from it? And the website is talktotransformer.com. And I did a little bit of very mild, very minimal preparation for this. I did go to this website, and I will show it to you here. This is talktotransformer.com. And what it is, it's a neural network that you post text into it, and then it continues the text according to whatever its algorithm is. So I got the script for the last proper Trek Actually episode, the Eugenics Wars episode, and I will just paste in the first paragraph of that script into Talk to Transformer here, and we'll see what it comes up with. So you just paste it into the window and you hit complete text, and you wait for it to finish doing whatever it does. There we go. Okay, so this is the continuation down here. So the portion that I pasted in, that I wrote, is writing speculative fiction can be a perilous undertaking. Most artists hope that their work endures in the public imagination long after its initial publication, but sometimes that endurance can lead to problems down the road, especially if the work in question becomes part of a long-running series. In this video, we'll look at one example of how Star Trek has encountered this problem and some of the ways the creators of various Trek projects have dealt with it as we wrestle with the question. And then the continuation, according to the AI, is we'll also talk about the impact this series has had on our own work in the years since our initial encounter with this phenomenon and how it still holds up. We'll examine how it has affected the way that we create speculative fiction ourselves and how our own work might benefit from exploring similar themes in the future. Now, I have to say, that's pretty darn impressive. It's nothing like what I wrote, but it's complete sentences, it's coherent, it's relevant to the text that went before it. It's pretty good. That sounds like a human being wrote it, right? Like, it fits. If you didn't know what I actually wrote after that, it makes sense. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Actually, I can see having a lot of fun with that website. Talktotransformer.com is the website. Next question is from Andrew Paris. Star Trek or Star Wars? Why? Oh, isn't that the eternal question? Well, I mean, the why is a lot more difficult to answer, I guess. For me, it's never really been a choice. It's Star Trek. And I don't think anybody who watches my channel very much would be surprised at that. If I have to choose between Star Trek and Star Wars, I choose Star Trek. And it's not even a race. Like, it's not even close. Of course it's Star Trek by a light year. But that's not to say that I dislike Star Wars at all, because I love Star Wars. I think I've mentioned before, I mean, when I was about 3 years old, I had Yoda pajamas, okay? I was born the same year Empire Strikes Back came out, and I was 3 the year that Return of the Jedi came out. My mom loved Star Wars, and I saw those movies from a very early age. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, as soon as they came out on video, on home video in the 80s, I was watching them. So I love Star Wars, but I prefer Star Trek because Star Trek just, I don't know, there's something about Star Trek that just that lingers with me longer. I don't know if it's the characters. I don't know if I just have more of an affection for Captain Kirk and Spock and Captain Picard and Riker and Data than I have for Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and Leia and Obi-Wan. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I've always loved both things, but I've always loved Star Trek a lot more. Maybe part of it is that I'm also kind of a nerd for space travel. I've loved human space flight. I've been interested in the history of human space flight since forever. And I feel like Star Trek, at its best, Star Trek can be read as a story about astronauts. The heroes of Star Trek are like the future equivalent, the 24th century equivalent of astronauts. They're space travelers, they're explorers, they're astronauts, and astronauts are my heroes. And Star Wars isn't really like that. I don't really think of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo as astronauts. You know what I mean? The space travel in Star Wars is much more like traveling from town to town in the Old West. Like, it's not really treated as a big deal, and it's not about exploration. It's more of an adventure fantasy story, and it's fantastic. But to me personally, Star Trek, because it is set in the future, because the heroes are astronauts, yeah, that just appeals to me a lot more. So yeah, Star Trek, and that's why. Next question is from Dr. Babylon. Have you gotten in touch with Jason to do the song yet? Somebody's in a hurry to see that Steve and Stuffy riff video. Not that I blame you, because it is ridiculously late. I mentioned it to Jason a little while ago, and I'm not sure. I'm opening a can, by the way. That's the sound you just heard. Very professional. I'm not sure if Jason is in a position to do it right now. I'm not sure if he's doing music right now. I will push him on it a little bit, and if he just says sorry, I can't do it, then I will push ahead without it and figure out something else. But in terms of the Steve and Stuffy riff video of if footmen tire you, what will horses do? It's still more or less in the same place that it was the last time you asked about it. Next question is from Eric Byer. Would you talk a little bit about the creative process for Steve and Stuffy? I'm especially curious to hear about the character of Toby Benson. I would love to talk about the creative process of Steve and Stuffy. They're my favorite videos that I do. Well, Toby Benson specifically. Toby Benson came, as a lot of the characters come from, they came from Ashley and I just doing voices, doing characters with the stuffed animals to make each other laugh and sort of building their characters out of that. So Toby Benson was her dog when she was a little girl, and he sort of acquired this personality as we would, goof on each other with him and try to crack each other up. And there was a running joke for a long time that Ashley owed Toby Benson money and that he was insisting that she pay him back. And then eventually that sort of morphed into less of a threatening relationship and more of a more doggish sort of loyalty thing where Toby Benson, he no longer wanted money from her, but he was like her best friend and wanted to protect her and was loyal to her no matter what, as a good dog would be. And then, Stuffy was my dog when I was a little boy, and Stuffy sort of became like the nice guy, the reasonable guy, the understanding, empathetic, loving person. And him and Toby Benson kind of had that dynamic with each other. And it just their characters evolved on video during the show from a combination of just finding funny things for them to do and bringing in other characters for them to relate to. Toby Benson, because his character roots were sort of predatory and sort of loan sharky, like people owed him money and he wanted his money. I thought it made sense for him to be a business owner. And I also wanted Toby Benson to be kind of a badass and kind of an ass kicker. So he's a Krav Maga master, and his job before a couple years ago when they started the detective agency, his job was that he ran a Krav Maga dojo, and he still does that. He's a Krav Maga, he's a martial arts instructor. And now he is also a private detective, because I thought that would be funny. And I thought it would suit Toby Benson's skill set, because part of his backstory is that he used to be a cop. He's a retired police dog. So he used to be a cop, so he has investigative skills that he can bring to bear as a PI, and Jack, being his significant other slash partner in crime, figuratively and literally, came along for that, and that just made sense. And Jack and Toby Benson are a really good pair together and play off of each other really well and have this wonderful, weird dynamic where they're like totally devoted life partners to each other, but at the same time they're also constantly bickering and at each other's throats and making threats to each other, but in a way that is sort of playful but also sort of not. And there's just a lot of, I'm very lucky that a lot of things have kind of built up over the years through all the videos I've done, and the result is that I now have some fairly well-developed, rich characters. You know, Toby Benson and Jack's recent streak of anti-fascism is both because I wanted to have like blatantly, proudly anti-fascist characters in the show because of what's going on in the world today. I wanted there to be characters in the show who were unapologetically anti-fascist and were bold and proud about that. And also because it makes sense for Toby Benson's character. He sees it. Toby Benson and Jack aren't necessarily all that political consciously. They're very political in practice, but consciously they don't view things in political terms. They view things in very selfish terms. And to Toby Benson, like fascists and white supremacists and those sorts of people are just assholes, and he doesn't like them and he wants to hurt them. And with Jack, it's a very similar thing. They view it much more as a street justice kind of thing of, you know, these guys are pricks and we shouldn't let them have what they want, and fuck them. Let's do something to them, you know? So he's doing the right thing for a somewhat less evolved, less elevated reason, but he's still on the side of good, you know. And I think that's sort of Toby Benson in a nutshell. So he's developed over the years in certain ways, and I'm very happy with how he's turned out. Next question is from Jason Todd, who says there are at least 2 Gul Dukat parody accounts on Twitter that post Cardassia-centric versions of Donald Trump's tweets. Do you think Trump and Dukat are that much alike, or maybe not so much? Is there perhaps another Trek villain that you think might be a closer fit? I think Trump and Dukat are alike in the sense that they are both completely convinced that they are the heroes of the story rather than the villains. They have that in common. They have this massive ego, completely out of touch with reality, in common. But that's really about it. Dukat is actually a likable character. In Trump, there's nothing likable about him. Dukat is interesting and multifaceted and has depth and complexity. And Trump has none of that. Like Trump, just there's nothing to him. He's flat and he's boring and he's not particularly intelligent. He's not particularly charming. He's not particularly skilled at anything that I can see, whereas Dukat is very intelligent and very skilled and very cunning. And if he were a real person, he would be utterly terrifying because he's deeply, deeply evil. And as a fictional character, he's great. You know, as a fictional character, you don't have to worry about the damage he causes because he's make-believe, and you can enjoy him as a fictional character and think, wow, Jesus, what a great villain. Trump is not a great villain. Trump is just a brute who has been given way too much power and way too much tolerance by people who have the power to rein him in and stop him. So is there another Trek villain who might be a better comparison for Trump? I don't know. I mean, maybe Mirror Universe Captain Kirk from Mirror Mirror, because the same thing, like he appears to be just selfish and malicious and not particularly good at anything. Like it's implied that he has his position as captain of the Enterprise because he was willing to kill the people he had to kill to get the job, not because he's especially good at anything, just because he's ruthless and willing to do what it takes to hold on to his power. So maybe Mirror Universe Kirk is a better fit for Trump than Dukat, but it's hard to think of one because the best Star Trek villains are complex and nuanced and interesting. And again, Trump is just none of those things. Next question from David Colby. I got a new book out. Yay! And as has become tradition, I shall now shill it. Viridian Nova is about Dr. Sarah Capel, an overworked, underpaid biologist working on an alien planet for her corporate overlords. When cost cutting on security robots ends with her being captured by the native aliens and transformed into an alien-human hybrid, she finds herself in a war between corporations and aliens with her own humanity on the line. As you may remember, Steve, you helped to choose the final line she says before tossing her CEO off a building. But I am sad to say this is merely book 1. That line comes in book 3. Ooh, I'll look forward to that. Now, Steve, my question for the week. Imagine that I, David, was given Noelle Stevenson levels of carte blanche to do a Star Trek reboot in the style of She-Ra. Same characters, same vague situation, but lots of structural changes. Here's my pitch, and I want you to tell me if it's good, bad, or just insane. And David, I will let you know ahead of time, I did edit this a little bit to make it a little bit shorter because it's just super long, buddy. So I hope in my truncating I was able to hold on to the essence of your pitch. So anyway, in this version of Star Trek, the Federation, being an egalitarian, anti-imperialist, stellar government, would frown on colonies and colonization. This means that they have 20 to 30 planets, mostly the homeworlds and pre-charter colonies, i.e. the colonies founded by Vulcans, Andorians, and the rest before joining the Federation. Surrounding those planets, they have hundreds of scientific outposts focused on studying the indigenous life without impact. This focus has led to the Federation getting extremely good at cloaking, decryption, and subtle anthropology via surgical disguises and covertly beaming down observation teams. Unfortunately, since they don't have an extraction economy powered by the subjection of other worlds like the Cardassians, Klingons, and Romulans, and since they have a fraction of the worlds those other empires possess, the Federation is ranked a 4th or 5th tier power on par with the Orion Star Pirates or the Ferengi conglomerate. The main characters, Kirk, Spock, Bones, and so on, would be on the USS Enterprise, a cloak-equipped science ship that gets bounced from mission to mission. Every single design of the Klingons is canonical in this universe, for you see the Klingons are genetically engineered warriors created by their gods, who they have now killed. So TNG-style Klingons are their ground combat breeds. The TOS-style Klingons are their space-adapted soldiers, smaller and more nimble fingers, you see, with less active metabolisms, requiring less food. The Disco-style Klingons were once the middle managers between their gods and them, but with their independence, they have stepped into the role as spiritual mediators. All of the Klingon culture is based around controlling the genetically engineered impulse for violence and conflict that their creators put into them. Romulans were always coded as space Romans, what with them having centurions and such, and so I'd just lean into that more. The Cardassians I wouldn't change much, though I'd make them even more fashy and obsessed with genetic purity. Space Nazis are fun for villains. The biggest change would be the Ferengi. Hold on to your butts. The Ferengi are human offshoots. The eugenics war was a class war. The wealthy were able to make their kids augments. Those kids became our de facto rulers until they were forced off the planet during World War III. They fled into space with primitive ships and created a nightmare dystopia space libertarian hellscape. For the first season, we'd interact mostly with their salesman robots as they tried to create and profit from wars throughout the galaxy, until the big reveal as we meet the Ferengi CEO, John Noonien Khan III. And that's my pitch. I like it. I mean, it reminds me of like an Ultimate Marvel kind of thing when they rebooted all they did like Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate or the Ultimates and what were like Ultimate Fantastic Four, Ultimate X-Men, and they just kind of took the essences of the original versions of the characters and rearranged a few things and streamlined a lot of things and cut out a lot of fat and just started over fresh. And it sounds like what you are pitching is kind of like Ultimate Star Trek. And I could get behind that. Like I can imagine it in sort of a She-Ra style animated series. I like the idea of the Federation not being the dominant power in the quadrant. Just as I would like the idea of a Star Trek series that does not take place on the flagship. You know what I mean? Like that's one of the things I like about Deep Space Nine, and that I especially like about the earlier seasons of Deep Space Nine, before the station becomes like the center of the universe. I like the idea of the series taking place on an outpost that is kind of out on the rim in the middle of nowhere. And yes, it becomes more important right away because of the wormhole, but still, Deep Space Nine is not the glamorous assignment. Deep Space Nine is not the flagship. The Enterprise, on any version of the Enterprise, is always the ship everybody wants to be on, and that there's good things you can do with that, obviously. But it's nice to tell a story, as you said in one of the lines I cut out from your pitch to cut it a bit down for length. It's more fun to tell stories about the underdogs sometimes, and casting the Federation as a bit of an underdog is an interesting alteration. So I think it's the premise there for what could be a really fun show. I would totally watch that show if that was the premise. Next question is from Isaiah Taylor. Hey Steve, even though I'm an atheist, I still struggle with the concepts of salvation. What is it? Is giving your life to someone, fascism of a higher power, really appealing? Is salvation just a cover for their issues on earth so that they can go to heaven, as if God just ignores one's past for just one more invite to heaven? The whole idea of salvation is fascist because it wants you to give up your uniqueness and individuality for the sake of being accepted into a higher place that believes only through perfection you can be accepted, despite the notion that God would likely accept everyone for the most part because God would likely understand their struggles and hardships. Not to mention the term saved could imply so many meanings, i.e. the sins of pop star, the sins of a pop star, Kanye West, that fucking huckster, compared to the sins of a normal person. We as people are imperfect. We make mistakes. We fail. And sometimes we don't make the cut. This is neither good or bad, as it is just the way it is. Yet, we could make it more fair. We cherish the good, learn from the bad, accept that we are only human, and seek to understand our place in the cosmos as much as we can, and that some decadence and silliness is not bad. I don't need to be saved because I'm not in any sort of danger, at least in this sense. Getting back to Vigerism, I, as a human, am blessed to contribute to human society in many ways, both good and, sadly, bad. It is comforting that the Voyager probes, even though they were created before I was born, carry the essence of human labor, science, knowledge, and culture into the void. It is almost certain that they will never be found, but the Voyagers will be a monument to our existence, and I'm grateful that my species, humans, contributed to this feat. The universe is 13 billion years old, but I'm glad to have enjoyed the last 27 years of it, and I'm looking forward to many more. To live, contribute, and thrive is, to me, being saved. Steve, what are your thoughts? I could hardly have said any of that better myself. I agree with you. I think I share many of your problems with the religious conception, specifically the Christian conception of salvation. I don't think it really has room for the complexity of who we are as individuals. I don't think the idea of, well, you can only get to heaven if you are saved or if your sins are washed away I just don't think that's a very coherent concept. You're right. No one is completely good. No one is completely bad. And if we're being asked to believe that there is a being in charge of everything that is all powerful and all knowing, and that this being created us as we are, created us as infallible, limited creatures with the capacity to commit evil, to be bad, right? Wouldn't that being be understanding? Wouldn't that being be ultimately understanding of our plight? And try to come up with the most fair, equitable, compassionate system for judging us, if indeed such a judgment were even necessary for the afterlife. I agree with you. I think the salvation concept, as it is typically put forward in religion, is just kind of silly and primitive, and reminds me of something that was invented thousands of years ago before we had learned quite as much as we have now. So yeah, I think your attitude is a much healthier one. Live your life, enjoy your life, do the best you can, try to do as much good as you possibly can, and when you fuck up and you do bad, acknowledge it, try to learn from it, try to make it right as best as you can, and use it to fuel you to become a better person. And that's really the best that any of us can be expected to do. So yeah, and as I said, with much of what you wrote there in your question, I would be hard pressed to say it better myself. Next question is from Ayame. Are you still planning to release your Atheist Reads series on iTunes? This is an easy one. No. I'm not. I actually, after I decided to end the Atheist Reads series on YouTube, I removed that goal or that milestone from my Patreon page. So no, I am not planning on. That's no longer a goal. So I think it was 2,000 a month. When I get to 2,000 a month on Patreon, that was the goal. I think. But anyway, no, I'm not planning on doing that anymore. I'm for the foreseeable future. I'm completely done with Atheist Reads, be it hypothetical podcast form or video form. I'm not going to do anything more for that for the foreseeable future. So I apologize to anybody who was waiting for that or hoping for that. I'm not planning on doing that right now. Next question is from Neo Normie. Yes, that's me in the corner building my religion. That's a little. I've started to watch Vosh videos, though I don't agree with him on most things. He does point out the weird purity tests that have even now started. Attacking both ContraPoints and Bernie Sanders seems a bit like arguing about bucket color as the house is burning down. I think really people should get some nuisance, I believe that's probably supposed to be nuance, and look to what unites us, not seek out a tweet or a video from 2010 as evidence of being a crypto agent. People's politics do change, as I was once a communist, but as I accepted my sexuality and read about the hideous treatments of LGBTQ people in communist re-education camps, I realized it wasn't for me. But under the New Left, if I had posted about it in 1995, there are people on the left who would see it as me being somehow dishonest. In the UK, we're about to have an election, and due to first past the post, my vote won't count in my area if I voted Labour, so I'm voting Lib Dems. I mentioned this on Chapo Trap House comments on their most recent upload, and was met with a reaction similar to my brief time in internet blood sports as the liberal heel, the Prophet Cthulhu, a dark period when I was dogpiled by AIU types, and though I tried to be upbeat, I'd be confronted with every form of abuse imaginable. What I'm saying is maybe before overreacting to something, just pause and think, what do we have in common before turning into a post-millennium Joseph McCarthy? Well, look, I agree with you there. I think... If a person is a decent person now, and it turns out that they were a less decent person 30 years ago, and that comes out, I don't think it's necessarily fair to just, to hold what they did 30 years ago against them if they're an okay person now. I think you're right. But a lot of it can depend on how they react to that. You know what I mean? Like, let's say you posted something really shitty on the internet in 1995, and today you're a good person, you do the right thing, people respect you, and you're thought of as one of the good ones, and then this shitty thing that you said 30 years ago comes out. If you react to that thoughtfully and you say, yeah, that's embarrassing, I was a different person back then, and to anybody who sees what I said back then, I was completely out of line, and I'm very, very sorry for saying it, and I completely repudiate those thoughts. I would never say or think anything like that today, and hopefully I've proven myself over the years that I'm not that person anymore, and I'm sorry that I ever was that person. Or if you accept responsibility for it, and you apologize for it, and you have been the type of person that you can now say, hopefully I've proven myself that I'm not that way anymore. That's a little different than if you react to it by saying, oh, come on, it was 30 years ago. Jesus, what is wrong with you people? Come on. I was a kid. Just forget it. Just let's not even talk about it, or it's not a big deal. It was a long time ago. A lot of people were posting that kind of shit on the internet. Just leave me alone. Like, if you react badly to it, or you get defensive about it, or you try to turn it around and blame the people who are bringing it up as a concern and act like it's their problem, then that's different. But if someone brings up something that you did in your past that you're not proud of, and you react thoughtfully and you say, yeah, I'm not proud of that, and I wish I hadn't done it, and hopefully I'm not that person anymore, then yeah, it shouldn't be a big deal, and it shouldn't be held against you. But if you react to it like an asshole, people might treat you like an asshole. But in general, no, I mean, I don't think, I agree with you for the most part. But a lot of the things that people are doing now, like the ContraPoints thing, and I love Natalie. I've said before, I haven't jumped off the ContraPoints bandwagon. I think Natalie is terrific, but I completely get why people are upset with her. And it's not an old thing from 2010. It's stuff that she has said recently and done recently, like inviting Buck Angel to do a cameo in one of her videos, to do a voice for one of her videos, or things that she said about non-binary people. And I accept that she didn't mean to cause harm. I accept that she didn't mean to be taken as an anti-NB person, and I accept that, you know, she doesn't believe in transmedicalism and all this stuff that people are accusing her. Like, I take her explanations for all of that, but the fact remains, she keeps saying shit and doing shit that sends, whether intentional or not, a message that is very harmful and very alienating to a lot of people. And I totally get why people are upset with her. And I don't blame anybody for being pissed at her. And it's not because of shit she did 10 years ago. It's because of shit she did this year. So I don't think that's quite the same thing. It's not the same thing as like, well, they're digging up a bunch of shit she said back in the day. Like, the things that I see people the most upset with her about recently are recent things, you know. And I don't think it's fair to characterize a lot of the anti-counterpoint stuff that I'm seeing on the internet now as, well, it's just, you know, it's grievances from 10 years ago. I don't think that's the case for most of it. So yeah, and as I said, I'm not trying to tell people how they should feel about her one way or the other. If especially if you are a trans person and you think that her content is not for you, or that she has demonstrated that she's just not someone you can support, like, it's not for me to tell you otherwise, you know. So yeah, but I mean, in general, yes, should we be looking into each other's past and digging up things to be pissed about? No, but at the same time, if something from the past comes up and you are the person it's being, you know, that the fingers are pointing at, getting defensive is not going to help, you know, and acting like people should just shut up and stop bothering you about it is not going to help. You know, taking responsibility and saying, hopefully I'm not that person anymore, and hopefully I can continue to prove that to you, like, that's a little better. Next question from a patron is from Matthew Rick. Do you think that we as a species will ever be able to move past humans' inhumanity against other humans, or the exploitation of the many by an elite few? No. I mean, that's such a depressing answer. I would really, really like to think that we can. And we have moved further along on that spectrum. Like, I do feel like we are much better at that than we used to be. We are less exploitative than we were. Or at least we are exploitative in less egregious ways. Although some might argue maybe it's just less obvious ways, because we're, you know, it's still pretty egregious, a lot of what goes on. So I would like to think that we are capable of it. Will we ever actually reach that point? I don't know. Probably, almost certainly not in my lifetime. But would I like to think that we will and that we could? Yes, that's the hopeful part of me. Marai Ziller. Don't know if this counts as a valid question. Probably more of a request. I posted it on the community page, but I don't know if you see them. Just saw you've got a new Steve and Stuffy video up, and I really want to watch it, but I used to watch them with my husky Cadigan, and she sadly passed away last Friday, so it'll take a little bit to bring myself to seeing it. She loved to sit with me and watch it while I rubbed her belly, and she was a big Millicent fan, obviously. I know it's a big ask, but my girl was pretty much the littlest hobo. I'm a transient traveler, and we spent most of our life together moving around on the road, often living in vans. If in your next episode you could drop just some small Easter egg of the littlest hobo, I'm not asking for anything big, maybe just a picture of the show or something in the background of a shot or a quick slice of the theme tune in the background or something like that. It would mean so much to me. I love the Steve and Stuffy series, and so did she. Thanks again for the videos. They're great and thoughtful and mean a lot to get to watch. Well, my deepest condolences on the death of your dog. It's absolutely the worst thing. I've only ever had one dog in my life, and she died when I was 21, and I had her since I was 5. So, and I still feel that. I still miss my dog. So I'm so sorry to hear that. Whenever you do get around to watching the most recent video, the one that just premiered today, there is a shout out to the littlest hobo in it. There's a scene, well, you'll see it. Me and Stuffy have a conversation about the show, and my character's actually watching the show on TV, and you can hear the last few minutes of the episode and the closing theme song in the background as we're talking. So I was happy to do that. It just so happened I saw your post about it, and I was able to work it in pretty easily, and I was very, very happy to do it, and I hope that it gives you some comfort as you go through the mourning process over the loss of your dog, because I'm so sorry about that, and I'm very happy that the two of you were able to watch Steve and Stuffy together and have a good time with that. That really means a lot to me. So yeah, hopefully when you get a chance to watch the episode, when you're ready for it, that will bring a smile to your face. Next question is from John Burnsy. Hi, Steve. Why can't movies look at things like books do? Show a story, beginning, middle, and end. For movies, it should be easiest. Of course, those who are above the director point can't help but stick their noses in and mess things up. The last few seasons of Game of Thrones sure showed how good writing and consistency at the top can affect that. And then there are the NGOs of the entertainment world. They mean well, but they have a POV that doesn't always fit into a simple story. Plus, they can be used as an example of what's wrong with society. It's not get the politics out that I am asking about. It's the Jeff Goldblum type question. You're so preoccupied with trying to shove politics into your story you never bothered asking the question if you should. I understand there will always be elements of politics in every story. Is it set in a kingdom or a republic? Well, then does it matter who's the king, who's the Senate consul? But KISS is a good rule for stories. I wish more would appreciate this. What are your feelings about this? Well, yeah, in terms of politics and stories, I like political stories. I like stories that have something to say, that have a message, that were made to communicate something beyond just the literal series of events that are depicted in the story. So I like political stories, but yeah, I prefer for the politics to be integrated into the story. I prefer for the characters to come across as people, not as mouthpieces for ideologies. So yeah, I think and it's not necessarily keep it simple, but it's remember that your first job as a writer is to tell a story and to give us good characters. And I like it when through those characters and through that story, you have a political point to make or you have a socially relevant message to convey. Like I think that's fantastic, but it's better to do it through a good story and good characters as opposed to doing something that is just nakedly didactic. I love my Star Trek political, and some of my favorite Star Trek episodes are super, super political episodes. But I think the better episodes are the ones that work as stories and as political message delivery systems. I have a soft spot for a lot of the really didactic Star Trek episodes, but the ones that are better are the ones that don't come across quite so preachy. Even I've said before, like I love my Star Trek preachy, but when you can do the preaching in a way that it feels like it's part of the story, that's just a lot better. So, and just taking it away from politics in general, yes, storytelling, I feel like in most cases should be as simple as necessary. I don't think a story should be any more complicated than it needs to be. So yeah, I agree with you. Keep it simple is a good thing to keep in mind for whatever kind of story you're telling. Am I making this too complicated? Does this need to be as complicated as it is? Can I simplify this and be a little more direct and get my point across without so much going on? Yeah, I think that's a good thing for anybody who wants to be a storyteller to keep in mind. Next question is from Wellington Marcus. Hi, Steve. I was going to ask a She-Ra question, but after the last Steve and Stuffy, I don't want to ask a question. I want to thank Millicent. When she said to the seal, "No, I don't want to discuss the issues with you because I don't care what you think," it gave me the strength to say that to the meanies who say, "Debate me, bro." Millicent is brilliant. My thanks to the sled dog. Well, I will pass your thanks on to Millicent, and I'm sure she will be appreciative of that. She always likes it when humans acknowledge her superiority and her brilliance. So I'm sure she will, she doesn't make that big of a deal about it because it is a compliment from a human. So it doesn't mean as much as it would from like a fellow husky, but I will pass it along and I'm sure she will be appreciative. But yeah, Millicent was in that case, talk about, having a character be a mouthpiece. Millicent was giving voice to what I personally think should be the reaction to those debate me bro types, which is, I'm not going to talk to you about anything because I don't care what you think about anything, which to me is, in my own personal experience, is the honest answer because I really don't care. And it's the best way to handle people like that. Instead of engaging trolls who just want to waste your time, just shut it down. And if you have to say anything to them, say, "Hey, I'm not going to talk to you. I don't give a fuck what you think about anything. I'm going to move on with my life. You have a good time doing whatever you're doing." So I'm glad you appreciated that. And as I say, Millicent, I'm sure will be glad to hear it too. Next question is from By the Lake 23. I felt like a passerby on a cold, snowy winter night, trudging past dimly lit, sleepy tenements every so often, pausing to glance at the domestic scene inside some stranger's household, imagining the lives they lead, their hopes, dreams, and joys and sorrows. I've recently met someone who has reignited my desire to feel the wind, to taste the snow, to live. Do you think we can live our lives happily while also being invested in other people's lives, especially while being cognizant of the many privileges we have that others don't? Well, short answer to that is yes. Yes, I do think we can be happy and be invested in each other's lives and also have an awareness of our privileges and of things that are wrong with the world, injustices that exist in the world. I think it's possible to have all of that. I think the thing to keep in mind is that life is not just one moment in time, and one moment in time does not speak for your entire life. There will be times when you will be angry, you will be frustrated, you will be overwhelmed by the injustice of the world, you will feel bad, you will feel guilty, you will feel like you don't deserve the good things that happen to you, or you haven't done anything to deserve the bad things that are happening to you. And there will also be moments of just absolutely exquisite, dizzying joy and beauty. And moments of tragedy and grief and sorrow, all of that goes with it. I think the thing to aim for is a life that gives you fulfillment, gives you a measure of happiness, gives you things that comfort you, that keep you hanging on, that are things you can hold on to, that give you strength, that give you purpose, that give you meaning. Things that you can love and can love you back or can give you a sense of fulfillment. Doesn't mean that everything's going to be great. Doesn't mean if you're in a relationship that every day in that relationship is going to be great. There may be times when you hate each other, or when you neglect the other person, or when the other person is neglectful of you. Hopefully you'll get through those times and you'll see your way back to a good place. And hopefully, and even if in the worst case, if the relationship has to end for whatever reason, you'll be able to look back on it and say, well, at least I'm glad that relationship existed. I'm glad that we were together for the time that we were together, even though it didn't last for the rest of my life. Life is more than just one day. Life is more than just one experience. So yes, you can be happy. You can lead a happy, fulfilling life and still be aware of all the shitty things going on, because you don't have to do everything all at once, and you won't. And there will be times when you're focusing on the bad shit. There will be times where you have no choice but to focus on the bad shit. And there will be times when you can relax and appreciate the good shit, hopefully. And the thing to shoot for is have enough of those times of appreciating the good shit that it makes everything else feel worthwhile. Next question is from Michael Beam. Hello, this is my first time asking a question on here, so I hope I am not repeating an often asked question. Have you ever been to or had any interest in conventions, Star Trek specifically, or other fandoms? I've been going to various cons for years. I think my first was in NYC in 1988, and my most recent was Shore Leave in Maryland this past summer. Thanks. Jesus Christ, I'm so sick of this question. Why do people ask this fucking question all the time? I'm kidding. It's not. You're not asking a too frequently asked question. I'm just a dick. I have answered this question before though, so feel a little bad. But I'm not super into conventions. I've gone to a few conventions. When I was tabling at them, I went to a convention. I went to a couple conventions, a couple of regional horror conventions several years ago when I was working with a local independent film company, and we had movies that we were showing at the film festival there. And it was fun. It was nice. Like I had a good time, but I'm not really a convention type person. Like I don't really, like paying for people's autographs or to take pictures with people. I don't like standing in line to meet, but the whole thing just doesn't appeal to me. Like I'm not that kind of a fan. Like if you're that kind of a fan, lots of people go to conventions and have a fucking great time, and more power to them. I don't begrudge them a single second of it. but it's not really my thing. Like, I've never felt, oh man, I got to go to a convention. I'm thinking about going to my first Star Trek convention next year. My dear friend Callie Wright PM'd me during this year's Star Trek Vegas and said, you should come to this next year. We could go and we could both go and hang out and it'd be a great time. So if I can afford it and I can get away, like, I'm thinking about maybe going to Star Trek Las Vegas next year if I can hang out with Callie. But that's not written in stone. Like, I'm not sure. That's just something I'm seriously thinking about. But for the most, like, I went to an atheist convention a few years ago, and it was only because it was literally like an hour away. I didn't have to travel. And I've been to both Reason rallies, again, because they were in Washington, D.C., and it's like an hour away. But generally speaking, I'm not like a big convention goer. It just doesn't, I just don't feel drawn to it, so that's probably the reason why I haven't really been to very many. Next question is from Tom McDonald. Hey, Steve, I'll try one more time. Congrats on 100K subs. Or have you finally begun the predicted long, slow decline into beautiful destruction? When did you actually hit the 100K? You certainly deserve the audience you've achieved. Well, Tom, thank you very much. That's a very nice thing for you to say. And thank you for having been a subscriber and a viewer and a supporter for these many years, long before I was anywhere close to 100,000. I think I actually hit 100,000 because we were talking about it 2 weeks ago during the last Ask Away. And I was really, really close. And we checked the counter a couple of times, and it just wasn't going to happen. It had gone up, and then it went down a little bit, and it just wasn't. I think it was probably sometime that night or the next morning, because when I woke up the day after the last Ask Away stream, when I was doing my YouTube stuff and going through my comments and stuff, and I checked my subscriber count, and it was over 100,000. So it was sometime about 2 weeks ago is about when it happened. I don't know exactly when. Someone did actually. They were looking at I think it's the Social Blade subscriber count, where it's like a real-time count, and you can see it going up and down as people subscribe to particular channels. And they were looking at my channel as it actually crossed over to exactly 100,000, and they screen capped it and sent it to me. And that was really cool. It's really cool to have like a picture of it, of the actual moment that it happened. And I really, really appreciate that. But I didn't see it, so I don't know exactly what time it was. But it was sometime on Friday into Saturday 2 weeks ago is about when it happened. So, and thank you very much. Thank you for the congratulations. I appreciate it. And I'm any day now. The destruction is going to happen any day now. Joe McClory. Although the tone of Star Trek is mostly optimistic about the future, the more I think about the Milky Way as presented by Star Trek, the more I think if I actually lived there, I would be filled with existential dread. Let's go through a list of things that one would assume every Federation citizen would know exist, as there is seldom a scene of the crew being told not to tell their loved ones of what they see, and the exploits of Starfleet ships are taught in classes. There are many races of aliens out there that, if they could, they would conquer, destroy, or enslave humanity. Multiple sciences have created life, sentient and otherwise, mostly by accident. Not only is time travel possible, but the galaxy seems to be filled with devil-may-care time travelers. And you know what else? It seems to be full of beings of unfathomable power, many of the sort that put Lovecraft's horrors to shame. And to put a bow on top of all of this, there is at least one parallel universe, mostly filled with evil people that could invade at any time, that probably has scarier versions of all the things I mentioned above. Given all of that, my question is, do you think if that was the world you lived in, would you be able to sleep at night, much less have the courage to join Starfleet? Well, shit, no, not when you put it that way, Joe. The thing about it, though, is most people seem pretty okay with it. Most characters in Star Trek shows, like the main characters, obviously, but most of the supporting characters and the guests who just sort of come and go for episodes, they seem pretty okay with it. It's just, I guess it's just status quo. They're just used to it by now. Like, oh yeah. There's a whole civilization of evil cyborgs that is just waiting for its opportunity to try and enslave all of us again. And yeah, there's a parallel universe full of our evil doppelgangers. And apparently it's getting easier and easier for people to cross over. So that's going to happen sometime. Yeah, you're right. the world of Star Trek is full of perils. But then again, our everyday world is full of perils too. So the perils in Star Trek are just kind of scaled up. You know, they worry about things on a galactic level because they live their lives on a galactic level. We worry about things at the level of our communities and at most at the level of the entire world because that's the level that we live at. And there are plenty of causes for anxiety in the real world. Just as there are causes of anxiety in Star Trek. So I think people who grew up in that world, obviously they find ways to function. They are resilient people, and hopefully I would be such a resilient person as well. But you're right. When you think about it that way, it's some pretty scary shit, isn't it? Question from Norman Bookwald. I noticed a number of TOS, TNG, and DS9 species are promoted to appear in especially Discovery Season 3. For Picard or Discovery, which Gamma and or Delta Quadrant species would you like to see again, besides the three main Dominion species and the Borg? Now, that's a good question. Well, I mean, I'm old school Star Trek, so anytime I get to see Romulans and Klingons, I'm happy. I think a lot of people are curious to see Klingons in Picard, to see what character designs they will use. I feel like if Worf makes an appearance, he'll be recognizable Worf. He'll be like TNG style makeup Worf, maybe with a few updates or alterations, but nothing drastic, nothing to the level of like a Discovery redesign. But it'll be interesting. It'll be curious to see. And as far as, I don't know, the first Star Trek alien species that comes to mind is the Zenkethi, because we've never seen them in a canon production. They've appeared in comics. They've been described in novels in various conflicting ways. And I believe they've appeared in the Star Trek Online game. But that's not quite canon. So I don't know if the Zenkethi, if they appeared in canon, would look like they look in Star Trek Online as sort of like big lizard people, which I believe is how they were. The writer who created them for Deep Space Nine envisioned them as looking like that, but they've never actually been seen. So part of me wants to see the Zenkethi, but then also there's another part of me that says, no, they haven't shown them yet. Let them stay a secret. Let them stay a mystery. So, I mean, I kind of want to say Zenkethi, but then again, I also kind of want to leave them unseen because it's more fun that way. John Brockman, Wonder the Ire. Spoonerisms are fun. So, D&D. Why aren't you in any games? Because the prospect of playing D&D puts me to sleep. I'm just not interested in it. I don't get it. It doesn't appeal to me. I remember I was one of my best friends in high school used to have middle school and high. We knew each other all through school, but through like elementary, middle school, and even into high school. For his birthday, he would have sleepover parties, and we would all get, we would all go over and spend the night at his house, and it was a bunch of teenage boys, so we would like play pranks on each other, and the first person who fell asleep got hair gel in his hair, and got shit written on his face with a pen or whatever. But at some point in the evening, the group would sort of split. And one splinter group would end up in the kitchen playing D&D, and the other would, stay in the living room and watch movies or play video games or whatever. And I remember, and I was always in the non-D&D group because I never played it. I never wanted to play it. I never learned how to play it. I was never interested in playing it. And I remember going into the kitchen to get like something to drink while they were in the kitchen playing their D&D game. And it just that little bit of it that I saw, I just thought, why would anyone do this? This seems like the most boring, least interesting thing in the world to me. But as I said about Star Trek conventions and other things, like a lot of people love it, get a kick out of it. It means a lot to them. It does something for them. They enjoy it. It's a way of making friends. It's a way of socializing. It's a way of being creative. So I don't begrudge anybody playing D&D or any other role-playing game. I think it's fantastic if you do that and you have fun with it. Not for me. It just doesn't remotely interest me. So that's why I'm not in any D&D games. And I believe this is the last question. Yes, the last question from John. Supposing that a different captain, ship, and crew were on the encounter at Farpoint Station and got put on trial by Q, how do you suppose it might have turned out had they been less vocal and capable than Picard? Would Q really have destroyed humanity? Or would he have just become bored with them instead and wandered off elsewhere to find a more challenging victim? knowing Q as we got to know him throughout the rest of the franchise and his subsequent appearances, I would say it's more likely that he would just get bored and go torment someone else as opposed to completely annihilate humanity. Q would often make reference to doing things like that, to erasing an entire species from existence or doing something like incredibly malicious and cruel and capricious. But we never actually saw him do anything like that. So I don't know if the Q that we got to know throughout the series would actually destroy humanity. I think maybe he would just get tired of tormenting humanity and, as you say, wander off to find a more interesting opponent. But who knows? You know, maybe the non-Picard captain would leave such a bad impression that Q would think, God, I have to get rid of these people. These people are the worst. And then he would snap his fingers and they would be gone. So who knows? I think we can all agree that we're very lucky that Captain Picard was the representative of humanity that was chosen for whatever reason in Encounter at Farpoint. Okay, that's it for the patron questions. Thank you, as always, to my wonderful patrons for asking questions. Let's turn now to the live chat for the last. We have a good healthy portion too. I got through the patron questions pretty quick, so we got a good 35 minutes to spend together in the live chat. So here we go. Oh, and look at that. A super chat from John Burns. Thank you, my friend. Ducat had better writers than Trump. Evil Kirk was like Joe Pesci in his prime. Best Star Trek character to match Trump. Q, obviously. Yeah, Q, I guess. But see, even Q is smart and charming. Like, Trump is neither of those things. But yeah, you can draw comparisons to Q and Trump. Hi, Leto. Hi. Okay, let me scroll up a little bit and try to find some of the questions here. Der Alta Trekkies. But if Q would have met Janeway at Farpoint Station, I don't know. I don't know. Janeway might have figured out something. Like Janeway, she always ends up winning in spite of how badly written she is. 255 AD, I forgot this was happening, so I didn't post a question until after the stream started. Please answer it anyway. Jeez. Presumptuous much? Let me look and find your question. Hang on. Okay, let me. While I'm looking for 255 AD's question, some random geek asks, "What are the best ways to earn more money?" I mean, do I seem like the type of person that knows the answer to that question? I have found that writing articles for things like for like content providers like the Content Authority or Text Broker can be a good way to make some extra cash. Unless you dedicate a lot of time to it, it's hard to make a lot of money at it, but you can make some extra cash if you need it or if you want to use it to donate to help support your friends. That's the only thing I would be able to say. Like I sell shit. You have some shit you can sell. Okay, it looks like there are a couple questions that were posted either right before I went on the air that I missed. Matthew Zeldman said, "Could you speak to the importance of replacing problematic Democrats?" Specifically ones who frame cooperation with Trump and his enablers as bipartisanship in the upcoming congressional primaries. Well, I'll just say very quickly, yeah, I think that's very important. I think it's very important to provide primary opponents to Democrats who are more Trump friendly, to at least give voters the option of putting a more progressive person in there. I think that's very important. And General Contact Unit Problem Child's question is, suppose Trump wins and manages to subvert U.S. democracy into fascism. If that happens, even probably if it doesn't, global warming will start killing millions of U.S. citizens. What do you think President Barron will do when that starts happening? Well, assuming President Barron will also be a Republican like his daddy, he won't do anything about it. I mean, that's just not doing things about problems are not really their thing. Okay, now back to the live chat. Inherited is the best way to make money, Michael Olson says. Yeah, it's a good job if you can get it. Oh, you know what? Joe McClory suggests Harry Mudd. Hey, a con man with no real skill but can trick people into thinking he does. Trump is Mudd. I feel like it's an insult to Harry Mudd, but that's probably closer than anything anybody else has said. Trump is probably closer to Mudd in terms of the type of person he is than any other character that's been suggested. That's a good one. That's a good one. Lovich says, "What's the issue between you and TJ Kirk, other than maybe some judgmental mods? You seem to be a pretty good dude. Please." Some random geek just said something down below here. He said TJ Kirk is an ass and a racist. That pretty much covers it, right? He's a racist. He's a misogynist. He's a rape apologist. He's a scumbag. I don't have any personal issue with him. Like we've never had a personal conversation. But he's a scumbag. And I don't like scumbags. I don't like rape apologizing, racist, abusive, harassing, piece of shit scumbags. So that's my problem with TJ Kirk, that he's a piece of shit scumbag. Super chat from Eric Marchand. Can we all just take a moment to revel in Roger Stone being found guilty on all counts? Yes, thank you for the super chat. And oh yes, let's revel, shall we? That's nice. Hopefully not the last either. Yeah, President Barron will move to high ground, I see. John Burns says, do you watch any of the Joe Rogan vodcasts on YouTube? No. I've never watched a single moment of a Joe Rogan podcast at all. Wolfwood says, hey, Steve, what are your hopes for the next 6 years? Anything planned? No, I don't really have anything planned. I hope that I still have a country and a place to live. Jordanime88, thank you for the super chat. The question is, are you concerned Trump won't leave office if he loses? Not seriously, but the thought does cross my mind. Yeah, the thought. I mean, I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little worried about it. But I don't seriously think that'll happen. But I mean, what's your opinion on the UK Labour Party's proposal to make fibre broadband free for all UK citizens? I think that's a great idea. I think we should have free broadband coast to coast in the US too. Leto Anor, Merlin isn't doing well. Can you send him good kitty vibes? Also, I'm separating from my partner. Can you wish me luck in trying to manage on my own? Yeah, I saw you posted about that. I think on Facebook you mentioned about separating from your partner. Yes, best of luck. Absolutely. And good thoughts and all my love to the kitty. I hope Merlin is okay. Some random geek. How can we end capitalism? What form of communism do you want to see? See, if I had like a concrete way to do it that I thought would work, I probably would be a lot more further to the left and more outspoken than I am. Like one of my hangups is I don't know how we would do it. So I don't really don't ask me. Like I don't know. 255 AD, South Park just did an episode where a trans woman enters World's Strongest Woman and wins. That's what I was alluding to earlier. Yeah, I realized that after you said I was kidding. At first I thought Rationality Rules is kind of, he's a little bit low on the totem pole for the South Park guys to have noticed, but who knows, maybe they go trolling for the shittiest YouTubers that they can find and, they just scoop them right up from the bottom. Yeah, I don't watch South Park anymore. So I haven't watched it for about 2 years. But I heard about that episode, and it doesn't really surprise me. Orion McMurray, in the original series, they had many races, even androids, and then in the next gen, you have Data, who is an actual android. Did they forget about the ones from the original series? I think they kind of did. I think they just sort of wanted us to pretend that they didn't exist. Or they wanted to establish that Data was more advanced. I think that's the idea. Data is, as he is sometimes referred to sort of differentiate him, he is a Sung-type android. So when people would see Data and they'd be surprised, they'd be like, oh, sometimes if they were in the know, they would say, wow, is that a Sung-type android? Because he's like more advanced than, say, the Harry Mudd androids. But they were still pretty advanced. Like there were still some pretty advanced androids on TOS. And I guess we're just supposed to pretend we don't know about those. John Burns, I've been hearing rumors that Jeffrey Epstein didn't commit suicide. Do you believe any of them? Also, did you like News Radio, the TV show? Yeah, I really like, speaking of Joe Rogan, I like News Radio a lot. I thought News Radio was a really funny show. And as far as the Jeffrey Epstein rumors, I have not seen any evidence, or I don't know of any evidence that it was anything other than a suicide. So I am not saying that it wasn't. I mean, I think at this point it's just conspiracy theories until you have proof that something else happened. Seal0626, do you reckon the original Trekkies, when they first saw the menagerie, were saying, that's Nurse Chapel, come off it, that's Nurse Chapel with black hair, what gives, every few scenes? Yeah, I'm sure there were some. There have always been malcontents in the fandom, sure. Der Alta Trekkie, best Star Trek Voyager episode. I really like The Thaw. I think this is usually my answer when people ask what I think the best Voyager episode is. I really like The Thaw, the one where Michael McKean guest stars as the clown who's like the embodiment of fear. That's a really good episode. The first Q episode is really good too. Death Wish is a really good episode. John Brockman, how surprising is it to learn the South Park guys are Thuglicans? I mean, it's not surprising because I've known they were libertarians for they were right libertarians for a long time, so it doesn't surprise me. 255 AD question. She-Ra introduced a non-binary character in season 4. I can't decide if this is good or not because said character is a creepy, shape-shifting bad guy. Well, I think in general representation is a good thing. I mean, if we want to shoot for equality in that way, then I would say that you can't expect for, say, non-binary people to only be presented as good guys. You have to have some non-binary villains as well because that's representation. Now, I see what I think you're saying. You wouldn't want the only representative of non-binary people to be a villain. I agree with that. Hopefully, some more positive representation will make its way into the show as well and into the broader media in general. You don't want them to just be villains. But there's nothing necessarily wrong with presenting a member of a marginalized group as a villain if it's done in a way that doesn't vilify that entire group. And again, if there's positive representation as well. A Trance, at what age did you start watching Star Trek? I can't really remember. It was really young. I mean, and I think I've said before, I remember watching one of the movies before I watched the TV series. But I was really young. I was probably 4, 5, 6 years old. It was before Next Generation started airing, which was 87. So it was before that. So I was probably 5 or 6 years old, but I can't remember specifically. Wolfwood 438, you think they will reboot Quantum Leap? I sort of hope not, but I'm interested in the idea. Yeah, I love Quantum Leap. If the reboot was good, I would watch it. Absolutely. Maybe if they did, have Scott Bakula play the Al character, to sort of do kind of a callback to the original and have someone else playing the Sam character. Or not, just start completely fresh. I mean, if it's a good show, I would watch it. I love Quantum Leap. I love Scotty Bax. I would love to see Scott Bakula in it somehow, but if he wasn't, if it was a completely different thing, I could be cool with that if it was a good show. Carlisle the Cinephile, do you know what Hogwarts house you'd be sorted into? Yeah, I did the Pottermore thing, and I was Gryffindor. Parody Error Films, I know you have your Riff movie for this year, but have you seen Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn gorilla? It's perfect for that sort of thing. My channel has it if you need it. Yeah, I haven't watched that. I think you mentioned that before. But yeah, no, I haven't. It's not going to be that this year, but I will keep that in my pocket. Yeah, Der Alte Trekkie, yes, the one that ends with I'm afraid I know. Yeah, that's a really good episode. Let me see. Jordanime88, aren't right-wing Star Trek fans so incomprehensible? Yeah, to me they are. Like to me, I feel like they miss one of the fundamental points of the show. Like I'm very careful about saying like you're still a fan. I don't want to gatekeep and say you can't be a right-winger and be a Star Trek fan. But I will say and have often said that I do not get it. Like I do not get why you would want to watch a show that tells you that you are wrong and that people who think like you are the thing that is wrong with everything and not change. Like you're still going to be that person. You're still going to have that ideology, but you're going to keep watching this show that relentlessly tells you that you are wrong. I don't get that. I would either change, I would listen to the message of Star Trek and change and become a better person, or just stop watching it. Like, I don't get it. But I think the deal is they don't get it. Like they honestly don't. It's right over their heads, or they're willfully ignorant to it. John Burns, instead of a Voyager movie, would you prefer something like Our Man Kim, where Kate Mulgrew, perhaps with a Russian accent, is Harry's spy master? I mean, it might be fun. Sure, it's not something I would put a whole lot of money into, but sure. A Trance, what would your thoughts be on a Star Trek Star Wars crossover? The two universes would have to be connected by a wormhole or something. Yeah, oh my God. I would be all over that. Again, if it was good, I would be all over that. Yes, Olam Drab brings up a good point. There is a history of LGBTQ type people that were villains, and it didn't help representation because, yeah, you're right, because there was no positive representation. Because like for years, the only characters in movies, for instance, that were gay or if not explicitly trans were sort of coded trans or could be read as trans were like serial killers like Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. And yeah, that's not a good form of representation. That gives people the impression that people in that group are evil or are freaks or are dangerous or whatever, and that's not what you want. That's why it's important to have positive representation. So that you can afford to have someone from a particular group be portrayed as a villain and not worry about mischaracterizing and demonizing an entire group of people. 255 AD, do you ever miss meat? Sometimes, not as much as you might think. Not as much as a meat eater might think. But sometimes, sure. John Gingras, thank you for the super chat. Star Trek Star Wars crossover? Yoda of Borg, am I? Oh, so you just wrote the whole thing right there. That's the log line right there. That's the high concept of the Star Wars Star Trek crossover. Yeah, John, because they love the military. That's probably a really good reason why right-wingers love Star Trek, because they see it as a military thing. You're right. That's DO03 says, read any good Star Trek comics? Yeah, sure. I've read actually, I think I've read all of the current IDW comics that are set in the Kelvin timeline. There was first just the series called Star Trek that ran for a couple years that ended, and then that was followed up with Star Trek Boldly Go. I thought both of those were excellent. So I think I've read a few other ones too that I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but I really like the IDW stuff. They're doing a really good job with the Star Trek comics these last few years. Seal0626, can you think of any principal male character other than Mirror Worf who ever acknowledged the possibility of being attracted to another man? Even that was very subtle between the lines to Garrick. Yeah, no, not really. No, I can't really think of one. Nick, Stuffy does have a mouth on him if he's pushed to that point. Joe McClory, best movie that just does nothing for you. Oh, good question. I mean, it's difficult to make that judgment because a movie that does nothing for me is a movie that I wouldn't judge as being very good. I mean, I think I know what you're getting at. Probably the Lord of the Rings movies that I've seen, because I've only seen two of them, because I saw the first one back when it came out, and then I saw the second one for the podcast, and that's the reason I'll eventually see the third one as well when we review it for the podcast. But I acknowledge that they're incredibly well-crafted films, and they obviously have a lot of appeal to a lot of people, but for me, they do absolutely nothing for me. So I would probably say the Lord of the Rings films. Der Alta Trekkie, no, I have never watched Roswell Conspiracies. I have seen the original Get Smart, but I've never watched Roswell Conspiracies. Yeah, Phoenix Espresso, I heard something about the pumpkin thing, but I'm not too familiar with it. Star Fox, where is Icheb and Picard? I have no idea. You think he'll show up? Maybe. Boil down AH. What did you think of South Park's depiction of Satan in the South Park movie? LGBT character, the hero that saves everyone from Saddam Hussein and yet still Satan. I haven't watched the South Park movie for a long time. If I watched it now, I bet I would notice things that I thought were a little problematic. But at the time, I thought it was really funny and thought it was he was a good character. 255 AD question: what do you think about people saying Rachel Oates turned to self-harm because she couldn't handle being called out by Essence of Thought? I still am not up on that situation, so I don't know. I mean, that sounds a little victim blamey if you say like she turned to self-harm because she couldn't handle. Like it sounds like you're kind of making it her fault. I don't know if you intend to do that or not, but yeah, I'm still not up on that. Carlisle the Cinephile, are you watching The Mandalorian? Yes, I haven't seen. I think the new episode went up today. I haven't seen the new episode, but I've seen the first episode, and I really liked it. I thought it was terrific. Joe McClory, are there any good non-cartoon He-Man stories you know of? You know what? Some of the mini comics that came with the action figures are actually pretty good. A lot of them are just little mini toy advertisements, but some of them are actually not that bad. They have a collection that I have on my Kindle of the original mini comics that came with all the action figures, and that is some very wonderful nostalgic reading if you're ever looking to get into old He-Man comics. Yes, John, intellectual dark web comics. That's what I mean. Yes. Some random geek again. How do we abolish rent? I don't know. Yeah, Bethany, I haven't read the Star Trek Doctor Who crossover, but I have read the Green Lantern Star Trek crossovers, and I'm gonna have to do a Trek Actually video about those at some point, because I'll mention it quickly here, and then I'll hopefully write something better about it when it comes time to do the Trek Actually video about it. But okay, so the Green Lantern Star Trek crossover. The premise is that the Green Lantern, a few members of the Green Lantern Corps, right, like Hal and John and I think Kilowog, a few of the Green Lantern Corps members make it into the Star Trek universe, the Kelvin timeline of the Star Trek universe, after the DC universe where they are from is completely destroyed. So they're like the only survivors of an entire universe that was destroyed. All their friends are dead. Their entire universe is gone. And they are so cool about it. Like there's no angst, there's no grief, there's no trauma about being the lone survivors of an entire universe. They're just kind of like, okay, here's the new universe, let's get to work. Like they're perfect Star Trek characters because they're totally resilient to anything that happens. So that's what I remember about the Star Trek Green Lantern crossover. But I thought it was a lot of fun. Daryl Letts, have you ever been criticized by other progressives and SJWs for throwing people in the camp under the bus for being sexual predators? I think it shows great courage on your part. Well, I guess it shouldn't be courageous. I don't think of it as courageous. I think it's just reflexive. It's just like, oh fuck, get that person away from me. Yeah, I've been sure. That's where the outrage brigade thing comes from, in part. People like Seth Andrews and Matt Dillahunty, who think that some of us are just a little too quick to jump the gun on the Lawrence Krauses. You know, it wasn't just the outrage brigade thing started with MythCon, and some of us saying, you know, hey, maybe don't invite racists and rape apologists and, you know, people who pander to fucking internet Nazis to your convention. Like, maybe just don't do that. That got us labeled outrage brigade. And then when we were like, oh fuck Lawrence Krauss. Hey, it turns out Lawrence Krauss is a sex offender, basically, someone who has been credibly accused of multiple acts of completely inappropriate behavior. Like, hey, fuck that guy. Fuck him. You know. We were criticized for that, for throwing him under the bus, or for jumping to conclusions, or not waiting to hear his side of it, or trust this, my favorite. Oh, it was BuzzFeed. Well, it was in BuzzFeed, so we can completely discount it. Like there's been a lot of that. But fuck those people. Like, fuck the people who do inappropriate sexual stuff, and fuck the people who take up for them and want to try to keep space for them. John, abolish prisons? Maybe. Definitely abolish for-profit prisons, for sure. Abolish prisons altogether? I don't know, maybe. John Carson, any ideas why the Q Continuum has a policy to not provoke the Borg? Because they wanted to have a joke in a Voyager episode, and that's it. Like, you know, maybe the Q want to keep the Borg under control because for some reason they don't want the Borg to completely overwhelm the quadrant and take over. So they're just saying, don't provoke them. I don't know, but to me, it just seems like a joke that they wanted, to have Q say to his kid in that episode, and they weren't really thinking through the larger ramifications of it. Dynacat loves me. When they both have mustaches, how do you know if you're watching Scott Bakula or Sam Elliott? You have to wait for them to talk, and then you know. Ahoy Erno, seen Lucifer on Netflix? No, I have not. I've heard really good things about it, but I've never watched it. 255 AD, how about that local sport team? Yeah, how about that local sport team? They won the championship cup, didn't they? Bethany, DC did a decent He-Man comic. Yeah, I know. I haven't read any of that, but I've heard that it was pretty good. Seal 0626. Will Ensigns Riker and Barkley turn into Commander Riker and Lieutenant Barkley when they get that far? Could be awkward. Run into Commander Riker and Lieutenant Barkley. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, we're gonna jump to TNG eventually, and we will be on that ship. So yes, we will run. We will run into them eventually. Yes. Yeah, I haven't read Star Trek and Planet of the Apes either. And Star Trek Transformers looks really fun, too, because it's Star Trek the Animated Series that they're using as the basis for the crossover. I haven't read that yet either, but that looks like a lot of fun. 255 AD, how would you eat if you had a replicator? Like a king. Like a king, my friend. A Trance, would you have preferred to have seen more of the Breen in Star Trek, or do you prefer that they remain shrouded in mystery? Yeah, I like seeing them as on-screen villains, but I also like that you never actually see them. Like I like that they're always in like a suit and you never see what they actually look like. I think that's a really good way to handle them. Makes them a more interesting villain. Would you ever do a video on the Breen? Yeah, sure, if I could think of a topic. Yeah, absolutely. What race in Star Trek do you feel were underutilized, and how would you change your portrayal? Any series? That's a good question. I mean, it's tempting to say the Kazon because it's not like they did anything with them in Voyager. They tried, God love them. They tried for like 3 seasons to make the Kazon into villains that we could care about, and it just never happened. So that's just raw clay if you think you have a great idea for the Kazon. But yeah, it's hard to. I mean, they're what the Hirogen in Voyager as well, like a really really great idea, a really intriguing idea for an alien species, and one of the better creations that Voyager had, but still lots of room for improvement. John Brockman, if you got the chance, would you make out with Eli Bosnick to make Mike Pence super uncomfortable? Eli should be so lucky. Okay? I might. It depends. If I had the chance, maybe. I don't know. John, or would you just make out because you secretly always wanted to? It's none of your fucking business, John. You keep stay out of my head, okay? That's for me. Some things are just for me. If you could, would you have changed anything about DS9? It would have run forever. I would not have put Bajor so far into the background. I thought the Dominion War was a good story and obviously resulted in many terrific episodes, but I still sometimes lament the loss of Bajor as a major story point. I think there was a lot of potential there in the original premise of reluctant commanders sent to a space station to try and prepare an exploited, ruined, recently liberated world for Federation membership. Like I would love to have seen more of that through to the end of the series. And they kind of wrote their way out of that and pivoted toward the Dominion and the war. And again, it worked out fine. The war seasons are really good, but I have a soft spot for the early seasons and the Bajor stuff. So I would maybe focus more on that. No, John, I didn't answer your Worf Tasha question. I'm sorry, I must have missed it. Yes, Bellany. I keep expecting the Breen to tell me they're here for the bounty on the war. Yes, they do. They do look like Star Wars bounty hunters, don't they? Okay, here's a super chat from. Oh, and he asked his Worf question. Okay, sorry, John. Thank you for the super chat. Worf, Tasha, fascinating concept. If Denise hadn't left TNG, no romance, remain in security, continue to show utmost respect for 5 seasons at least. They realize they are outcasts. Good. What if? Yeah, it actually sounds a little bit like my suggestion in my Tasha video, where if Tasha had lived and had remained chief of security, what do you do with Worf if Worf doesn't become chief of security? And my suggestion was that Worf becomes basically Tasha's number one. And yeah, they don't become romantic, but they become like, siblings in arms. They become best friends. They rely on each other. There's like a deep, well-earned respect. And Worf is like Tasha's number one guy. And Tasha remains in charge of security and tactical on the ship. And Worf is the one who leads the security presence on away teams most of the time. That would be my idea. But yeah, I think that would be a great concept to keep Tasha on the show and also to not lose Worf. James Stoddard, any thoughts on Arma's killing of Tasha? I mean, I did a whole video about it. I love Tasha. I thought Tasha was a great character, but I also think that her death wound up being a turning point that led to TNG becoming a much better show. But I mean, if they could have become a much better show without killing off Tasha, like that would have been great. Or if, Denise Crosby had wanted to stay on the show and the show had continued to get better, I think that would have been great because I thought Tasha was a great character. Some random geek, should we forgive all debts, Steve? Yes, we should forgive all debts. And whatever else the other thing in the Lord's Prayer is. Forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors. That's one of the things in the Bible that's actually a pretty good idea, don't you think? How would you, the Age of Reason, how would you rework the Ocampa in Voyager? Well, I would either not have Janeway premise they're staying in the Delta Quadrant on protecting the Ocampa, or I would find a reason for Voyager to stick around Ocampa in space to protect them. Because the thing about the Ocampa, that the only thing about them that really bothers me is Janeway says, I'm staying in the Delta Quadrant because I won't sacrifice the Ocampa to the Kazon. And then she immediately leaves the Ocampa planet. So it's like, what's stopping the Kazon from coming back and fucking their shit up anyway? Like, so yeah, I would fix that somehow. John Burns, better what if in Firefly, if it had gone on and they found out that River was this uncontrollable killer who might eventually wipe out the rest of the crew. See, I can't comment on it because I haven't seen enough Firefly. I only saw like the first 4 or 5 episodes of Firefly. Bethany, Tasha in your headcanon is trans and QAF. I mean, that sounds great to me. John asks, do you think Klingons grow single-use removable penises? One less target in battle. It makes perfect sense. I don't know, but it makes perfect sense. Yes, John, that is there are 2 versions of the Lord's Prayer. One of the, there are way more than 2, but the 2 that I'm familiar with, there's one that's forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, which is sort of the more lyrical version. And then the version that I learned in church is forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Question from 25580, thoughts on SF Debris? I have never watched a single SF Debris video, so I cannot comment. I have no thoughts. I haven't watched. Olam Dreb, seen or heard much about this HBO Watchmen series? Yes, I really, really want to see it. I don't have HBO, but I see that it's available on Amazon, so I think I might wait until the entire series is released and then buy the season on Amazon to watch it because, I hear really good things about it and it seems very intriguing. And I'm a big fan of Watchmen, the comic. So, yeah. Joe McClory, feelings on Wesley Crusher? Really poorly written character played by a really, really likable, appealing actor. A Trance, my favorite Star Trek novel. I think I've mentioned before, I haven't read a lot of the Star Trek novels, and it's been a long time since I've read any, but I remember really liking Federation. I read Federation, and I think it came out right around the same time as the Star Trek Generations movie. And it's a similar story, but Federation is just a lot more epic and includes Zephram Cochrane and has contrived to sort of bring the entire crews of the two enterprises together, although they don't actually meet and they don't actually see each other, but they sort of face each other across a black hole. So you have Kirk's Enterprise and Picard's Enterprise sort of in the same place in space-time. And I remember really liking Federation, so I'll probably say that. Let me see. CL0626 would have been interesting to see Worf defying expectations by being a Klingon in Starfleet, but not in a Klingon role being violent. Yeah, well, I mean, my idea, he would still be kind of violent. But yeah, I agree. That's kind of what they went with him a little bit in that direction in Deep Space Nine eventually, by having him become more of a command officer. Bethany, it is not an adaptation of the Watchmen comic. It is, I believe it is set after the events of the comic. It's sort of like a sequel to the comic. And it sounds really interesting. Daniel Francis in the DS9 retrospective, they have a hypothetical season 8. What did you think of it? It sounded like a good starting point. It certainly sounded like it would be a really intriguing first episode of a season 8. I mean, God, of course I would totally watch it. Andrew Priest, what's your favorite technology that was needlessly abandoned after one failure? Transwarp drive, soliton wave, spore drive, slipstream? Well, my favorite is the slipstream, because there's no reason why Voyager couldn't have used that to get all the way home. Like, it only took them so far, but couldn't they just fix the engine and then activate it again and travel another great distance? Like, they could have sort of hopped their way home with that slipstream drive, right? But yeah, they turned it on and it failed, and I guess that was the episode where they had to go back in time, like, to stop it from destroying the ship. But like, once they figured all that out, they could have used it again, right? And just stopped before it got to the blow up point, and they could have kept jumping further and further home, but they didn't do it. So yeah, the slipstream, I think. CL0626, was Cisco promising to come back right at the very end by leaving his baseball on his desk? Felt to me a lot of it did like they were very much planning to carry on and had to cut it short. No, they knew that was the end. They knew that season 7 was it. But yeah, I mean, I think they wanted to have, they wanted to give the impression that Cisco was not gone forever. That's why they had that scene with him and Cassidy where he said, I could be back tomorrow, next year, or yesterday. And that's why the baseball was there. Absolutely. But no, that was the planned ending. They didn't have to cut it short. Like, they knew going in that season 7 was the end. Super chat from John Burns. Once again, thank you very much. Firefly, only 14 or so episodes. Also, Wesley reminds me of what happened to Rose from Star Wars. Yeah, in terms of like the poor treatment from fans and stuff like that, I agree. And the Firefly thing is even worse because I own it on DVD. Like, I have it right here. Not right here. It's not like right down there. But it's in this house. And I still haven't watched more than like the first disc. Joe McClory, favorite episode of Enterprise. Oh man, I can't remember the title of it, but it's from the first season, and it's the one where they have like a close encounter with a comet, and there's also a scene where they're answering the bridge crew is answering questions from a school back on Earth, and I have very warm feelings about that episode. And again, it's very astronauty. That's one of the things I liked about Enterprise that I wish that they had a lot more of, which is it felt very astronauty. I really wanted to think of the crew as astronauts. All right, I'm going to wind this up because it's after 7:30 for me. It's 90 minutes, and I'm going to wrap it up because I usually end after 90 minutes. But yeah, someone said, dude, end this stream and watch freaking Firefly already. I'll get around to it eventually. Probably not tonight. I've got a lot of shit to do, but eventually. 255 AD, do you ever pirate TV online? I haven't for a long time. I won't lie and say I never have, but I have, but not. I try not to. If I can pay for it legitimately, I do. Oh, Jordanime88, I can't really do Patreon for you, but I can do this as an alternative. Keep up the good work, and thank you for answering questions. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. John Burns, another super chat from John. Thank you very much. And this will be the last question. Are you going to watch the latest episode from The Rookie starring Nathan Fillion? I know many think ACAB, but it guest stars Alan Tudyk, Firefly, Tucker and Dale versus Eve. I don't watch that show, so I have no plans to start watching it. But the fact that it's a cop show doesn't turn me off. I mean, my feelings about real life cops don't stop me from watching and enjoying a good cop show. NYPD Blue is one of my favorite shows ever. So, but I don't plan on watching that show because I don't watch that show. Okay, that is it for the questions. Thank you all, as always, for the questions, and to those of you who left super chats, I appreciate it. Take note of the charity links in the description of the video, as some random geek has mentioned a few times in the live chat. There are many of our friends, unfortunately, who need a little help, and I have posted links to their various crowdfunding campaigns in the description of this video, and if you can afford to donate to one or more of them, please do, and if not, please consider sharing them on your social media to help them out. Also, if you enjoy this show and you want to get your question in and you want to make sure that I answer your question and I don't miss it in the live chat, a reminder that I answer questions from Patreon patrons early, and I try to answer every question I get for a particular episode from patrons. So you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives, any level of patronage, and you get access to the call for questions for Ask Away, and you can ask your question and I will answer it. Patreon.com/Steve Shives. I could not do this without my patrons. I love you all, and I appreciate your support. So patreon.com/Steve Shives to support this channel. Also, in addition to the YouTube thing, I co-host a couple of podcasts with my buddy Jason Harding. You can go to lemmylistenpodcasts.com to listen to all of the Let Me Listen podcast family, but pay particular attention, if you're a fan of mine, to Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I co-host with Jason, and also the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that we do, that has a new episode up today, actually. So go check out the Ensign's Log at lemmylistenpodcast.com or at SoundCloud, or subscribe via RSS using your favorite podcast app. The links to all of that are in the description as well. And that's it. We're done, my friends. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you especially to those of you in the live chat for watching and interacting and asking questions. Everybody, have a good evening, or whatever it is, the rest of the day, wherever you are when you're watching this. I appreciate you. I thank you, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.